Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Q&A. I'm shooting these Thursday evening because things kind of changed for scheduling tomorrow, so if you have any questions that came in after this, this probably won't go up till midday Friday anyway, so I'm sorry if I missed any. Please just re-ask them next week. But anyway, let's jump right in. First up, Krebstar is looking to buy their first SCART switch. They've watched my videos and read as much as they could and want to know if I'd heard anything about the new Optical 6-in 3-out switch. They're only looking for two simultaneous outs, one for their OSSC and one for their PVM, and they want to know if they should just wait for the next G-SCART or check out the new Optical switch. So I have one of the Optical switches here, and I'm in the middle of reviewing it, so I don't want to give too much info on it because I haven't finished all of the crazy in-depth testing I usually do. I did have one minor issue, which I don't know. It could very well be my setup. I've been talking to Maurice, the creator, and kind of going back and forth. He's been great, so I want to make sure I take my time before I get the review out. But so far, there are a few quirks with it, but it performs way better than something of that price range. And I mean that truly as a compliment. It's under $100 and performs really well. But the other side of that is I'm definitely biased towards the G-SCART switches because of how long they've been on the market and because of my friends that run tournaments that will throw a bunch in a backpack, travel around the world, and really beat on these things. And unless you send really high voltage through them, like the arcade boards that people were using with bad super guns through these things, I mean, that's pretty much the only scenario in which these things are going to die. You use the wrong power supply, basically sending wrong voltage. So other than that, it's a rock solid piece of equipment at the moment, and it has been for a long time. So while yes, Super G is my friend, my bias isn't the friendship, it's time, just like I said in that video. So if you really don't mind spending the extra money and you want something that has a bunch of features that you may or may not ever use, but it certainly is there if you need it, definitely get the G-SCART. If you're looking to save a few dollars, I will have that review out within a few weeks. I've been so backlogged, I haven't had time to do any of the more in-depth stuff, so hopefully I'll be able to get to that soon. But it doesn't seem like a bad option at all, but I haven't gotten to some of the more really in-depth testing. You know, what happens with the audio, what happens with voltage, what happens when you turn on a bunch of consoles at the same time, does the voltage change, what about multiple outputs at the same time? So right now it seems cool, but I'm not comfortable really giving much more info on it until I'm done with the review and everything. So sorry for kind of copping out on this one, but hopefully I at least put things into perspective and made it easier to understand. One of the questions from last week was if I knew of any PSP consolization kit that was in the works. And while I didn't, a few people had messaged me right after the Q&A went live and said that Retro Revolutions, a person on YouTube, was working on a kit. And I went and checked out the channel, and it looks pretty cool. They posted a series of videos on how they're going to do it, and they said there's another video coming soon to show how it's getting all finalized. I didn't want to reach out and bother them when things are still in the works, so once I see that video pop up, I'll definitely reach out, ask some questions, and maybe be able to borrow one for a review. I never mind borrowing something. I never like asking for anything for free. So, if you're out there and you're a product maker and you ever get a message from me asking to borrow something, please know that I do mean borrow. I don't mean like send me free stuff. Like, I do send things back. And while a few people have given me things, a lot of times it's because they said, hey, I want you to have this so that when there's firmware updates, when there's more testing that needs to be done, if you need to throw in another video, and I do accept those, but it's rare that I'll just take something that's, like, hey, thanks for the free thing. I always feel really guilty. I'll usually pay for it or something else. So just want to give that, I know that's totally off topic to the subject here, but I just wanted to make sure to make that clear to everybody. If you're somebody who makes products, feel free to send them around. And I've also many times had a product sent to me. I checked it out and reviewed it and then sent it to the next reviewer, to the next. So I try to always, be transparent and honest about everything. And hopefully I'll talk to Retro Revolutions and borrow a kit and see how it works. Dave Phipps wants to know if you could take a Laserdisc player and mod it for something like RGB like you would in old NES, and not in the way that you're thinking. See, Laserdiscs encoded their video as composite video. So even if you were to find a Laserdisc player with S-Video out, or if you were to try to do some kind of mod to it, you would essentially still be sending a composite video signal. Now, for VCRs and Laserdiscs with S-Video out, I have seen a sharper signal, but that's almost always because of cabling. an S-video cable running 6 feet is going to generate less interference probably than a composite video cable. Or it could have also been that I was using junky composite video cables and good quality S-video cables and not realizing it. But the point is, if you own a Laserdisc player and a collection already, I would absolutely not hunt down one with a different output or try to do some kind of mod to it. I would just get a really good shielded composite video cable and just kind of use that. The only other thing to mention is if you have a Laserdisc collection with discs that have never been backed up and archived before, especially if it's anything rare or cool and weird, the Doomsday Duplicator project is pretty incredible because it essentially reads all of the data off of the disc and saves it as an incredibly large file, and then another piece of software decodes that, both the multi-channel audio as well as the video into a file. So that's something you would want to look into if you had a special use case scenario, and it's pretty expensive and mildly complicated. So if you only had 1 or 2 discs, I would try to contact anybody that's part of that group. They have a Discord now and everything, and just see if there's somebody near you that would be able to rip those and share them with the community. So just search RetroRGB for Doomsday, DOMESDAY, and you'll see the interview I did with Simon and Chad. And I actually want to do a follow-up interview with them soon at some point and talk about VCR support and everything else. But sorry, there's no like quick and easy RGB mod for your Laserdisc player, but hopefully I gave you some good tips on what you were looking for. Mark Main wants to know how you get widescreen mode working on the GameCube. They changed the setting in Super Mario Strikers, and they're using the component video cables, but it doesn't switch the aspect ratio on their 4K TV. Is there some kind of trick I'm missing? So one thing I run into all the time is TVs, especially if you have an LG TV, that default to one mode that always seems to look fine in, with modern TV in 16:9, but whenever you switch resolutions, it doesn't detect it and you have to manually do it. So for example, if I set my TV to 4:3 mode, play a 4:3 Xbox game, let's say, and then want to play a 16:9 game, I would have to manually go in and switch the TV to 16:9, or I believe it has a setting that's like full mode or something. It's labeled really weird, but in most cases with stuff like this, you'd want to mess with your TV first. And for whatever reason, if you can't get that working, I would try booting to Swiss first, even with original discs, because if it just so happens to be a weirdness in the game, you could force video modes in Swiss, and I've had better luck with that than I have holding down exit boot to get into progressive mode and stuff like that. So try both of those, and if for whatever reason your TV doesn't have aspect ratio controls, you might be out of luck. Now, almost every TV I've seen has it, but I've seen plenty of computer monitors that don't. So something to look into as well, just as a backup plan, is maybe Google your TV, read the manual, and see if there's any other settings like that. But hopefully between the aspect ratio settings and Swiss, you could get yourself straightened out. Here's a follow-up question from last week's discussion about whether to use a pandoras box in an arcade machine. Raymond responded and said the goal of the cabinet is as good of a possible arcades experience with an LCD screen. They're sensitive to lag, but not a pro gamer, and their friend said he had no complaints with the Pandora solutions he used and sold. In a normal situation, they would drive to him to check it out, but it's 250 miles from their home, and they're in between two houses. He said he could find a system, or he said if you find a system and he could build it for me, how are those Linux pre-builds named so I could read more about it? I have several old PCs here doing nothing special, if those give less lag. So the question is the best solution even without emulation and with. So a few things. You absolutely could have a great experience on an LCD screen, no doubt in my mind. It's not going to look exactly like a CRT, but it doesn't matter. And also, I think I'm a little bit more sensitive to lag than most people, but I'm also no pro gamer. I can't pull off insane moves that some of my friends can, but I could still detect lag pretty easily. And it's not because I do this. I was detecting lag when I was playing before I understood what lag was really. So it's something I've always been sensitive to. Now, maybe the new Pandora's box solutions are better than the old ones, or maybe the people that he sold these systems to were just in it for the novelty. And I don't mean any disrespect by that, but a lot of people buy these setups because they think it's neat. Oh, let's play Pac-Man for 5 minutes and turn it on when I have a party, but no one actually games on them. They just kind of have some fun and it's pretty laid back. So I don't really know enough about the brand new Pandoras, but my gut's telling me don't trust them. So sorry. I mean, I might be wrong. I'm wrong all the time. I always admit when I am, but I just had I just had some very poor experiences with those, and definitely wouldn't recommend them. As for exactly which Linux build to use, I'm going to try to get that post written within the next day or two. It was something that Dan Mons was working on. I was hoping he might write it up for me so I don't make any mistakes in it, but one way or another, I'll try to get that up on the website because it looks like something that would be pretty beneficial. So in my opinion, Mister would absolutely be my first choice, and it would be pretty easy to use with an LCD monitor because you would just use the HDMI out. Heck, you could even put a splitter in there if you wanted HDMI out to the LCD and another HDMI out for streaming or anything like that. But you can't have the wide variety of games that you would on emulation, so you're going to have at least two solutions if you want Mister and all of the other games. So I'll try to get that post up about the Linux build. If not, I'll just try and remember to find a link and respond to you here. But, is anybody out there playing the new Pandora's boxes? Are they as bad as the old ones? It would be pretty cool to hear some other feedback about it from people that are also sensitive to lag. Vitor Dalacqua had a question. I'm really sorry if I mispronounced your name. They want to know that since Mister can output 15 kilohertz 240p over HDMI, would a converter like this work? And there is an HDMI to SCART converter here that was linked. They know that you could use an HDMI to VGA adapter and then VGA to a passive sync combiner, but that would require a fewer box in the chain. So I would really have to read up on something like this. I would really have to go through all of the specs and see. But if all it's doing is converting the signal, then you should be fine. But if it's doing any kind of scaling whatsoever, anything at all, then no, you would not be able to use it because it would add a ton of lag. It might not even be compatible, but it still might not even be compatible with 240p. It lists 480i as a solution. To be honest, if you have a component or any kind of monitor that accepts component video, HDMI to component is definitely the better way to go. If you need to use SCART, give it a try and see, but just know that a lot of these converters don't do exactly what they're supposed to, and or they're just not compatible with 240p, because that wasn't even an official signal. That was just kind of a way that game manufacturers got a progressive scan image on the TV. So you could roll the dice for that one and see. I wouldn't get your hopes up until after you tried it. Enforcer says they tend to live more on the technical side of gaming and walk the line between collector and maintainer of old equipment. Who has the time to play anyway? Recently, I repaired the power supply of my Extron Crosspoint and posted my findings on Reddit in hopes it would help others. Are these the kind of articles that could have a home on RetroRGB, as I'm not yet looking to start my own site and would rather have them preserved for the future wiki? So this is absolutely something that would be on the wiki. And in fact, I will be taking all of the guides off of RetroRGB and put them on the wiki. So essentially, RetroRGB would become mostly editorial and suggestions, and the wiki would be just the facts. That we should have probably started on this 6 months ago, but with everything that happened, we had like a team meeting back in February, January, whatever, and had a pretty solid game plan, and then everything just, the rug got pulled out from under all of us. So, if things had happened different in the world, the wiki probably would be live right now. So just please hold on to that for the wiki. A year ago, I might have said, hey, send it to me and I'll throw it up on RetroRGB for now. But to be honest, it's, I'm already working on planning to take everything off that's a guide. And any further or future news posts about guides would just be, hey, a really awesome guide was just added to the wiki, check it out here. Here's a link type of thing. So thank you very much for the suggestion and for the offer, but I definitely want to try to get the wiki rolling on the faster side of things, because that's a project that's gone on way too long, and we got to get it going. Cameron McCown wants to know if there's a recommended device that could add scanlines to a RAD2X or just an HDMI signal in general. As far as I know, there aren't good ones out there. There are some that don't do the greatest job. You could convert your image to VGA, put it through a scanline generator, and then convert that back to HDMI. But it's my opinion that if you really need scanlines, get a RetroTink 2X Pro or the OSSC, depending on what inputs you need for it. And, hopefully in the future, which, this it might take 10 years because of the chip technology, but I would love to see like a 4K HDMI scaler that adds much more detailed scan lines. So whether it's a RAD2X, an OSSC, a MR, whatever, you could now scale that any way you'd like to 4K and add whatever crazy scan lines you would want. That product definitely does not exist and probably won't for a while just because of the chip technology that would be required to do something like that. So short answer to your question is no, I don't think there's any that's worth using. That does kind of stink because if you already invested in a couple of RAD2Xs and then decide that, hey, maybe I do want scan lines, probably would have been better to go the other way. But there's always eBay. I think with them being short in stock, you could still get most of your money back for it if you do need to upgrade, or just keep them in a drawer somewhere. Because if you're like me and you're constantly messing with stuff, you'll have no idea how often you'll use those things when you don't even realize that you need them. So I have them in a box right here next to my head because of all the times I'm like, crap, I just need to fire something up, and like, all right, capture card, RAD2X, and I'm done. So sorry, there's no better answer for that. Curtis Singer wants to know, what are some consoles or retro game mods that you'd recommend installing for someone who's just starting out with soldering, looking for something relatively low cost that they could practice on, but see results that motivate me to keep getting better. Was thinking of trying a cap replacement on my PC engine, or perhaps some flavor of Game Boy modification. So I wouldn't start with a cap replacement. I would start with something that is only adding, not taking away, if that makes sense. I think the mod for the Super Nintendo Mini, not the one that uses the encoder on the chip, but like the Voltar board, and I believe there's other boards that people sell. Boardy made a board that I think other stores sell for it. The one that you could drop over the pins and then you just solder the 4 wires to RGBS on the motherboard. I think that's about as easy as it gets. If you try to use ribbon cable, you're going to have a hell of a time getting all 4 of those wires lined up and in. You're going to have to tin them first, get them in nice, and try to make it, that's going to take quite a bit of time to do it right. Once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy. But the first few times I did it, it drove me crazy. And I remember messaging Voltar, like, why are you having me do this crap? I'm going back to the wire I was using. And, after a whole bunch of profanity later, I stuck with his suggestion. And now I completely agree for all the right reasons. So that's one of them. Early model N64s, same thing, same theory behind all of that for the RGB mod. If you're looking to replace something first, you could try like replacing your batteries for in-game cartridges for save games. I'd probably start with a bigger cartridge like Super Nintendo, just because there's more space in there. Game Boy is another one you could do, but it's a little tighter in there. And kind of go from there. PC Engine has very few capacitors compared to other consoles, so that is a good one. But it's also that flex cable that's in there could be a pain. There could be a bunch of other things. So maybe try a Super Nintendo, because there's only like 6 caps. And while I haven't seen them do major damage, I did open one that was leaking a little bit. So it wasn't like you see on Game Gears and stuff like that, but it was enough where I thought, all right, well, every time I buy a new Super Nintendo and mod it for a friend, I'm just going to throw the new caps in there too, just for the heck of it. So I guess that's where I'd kind of start out. And then I'd just start looking at guides online, any guides on RetroRGB, of course, and all that stuff, and try to find things that look similar to those, but maybe, the next step after that. Another fun one is the GBS control mod. You also have to learn how to use Arduino software. I hope that the video and then the page on the website that I wrote spells it out pretty well. I actually don't remember if I went back and wrote that page. Now that I think about it, there might be a draft of a GBS control install page sitting on the website somewhere, but the video should be decent enough. But I liked that one. There was some tricky spots for beginners, but that's one that's definitely something to motivate you because you could do a lot with it. So I would definitely start out with those and then kind of look around and see similar things to that and just take it one step at a time. Bad Reality said they watched the recent Rad2X video I did, and it reminded them of an observation about how CRTs draw their screens. Now, I just read your question a couple times, and I don't 100% understand it, so I'm going to try my best with this one. So it takes, 0 milliseconds, pretty much. It's in the microseconds from a console's analog output to hit the top left corner of a CRT. And then it's drawn one line at a time, and it takes 8 milliseconds to get to the middle right. And then in NTSC world, 16.5 milliseconds to get to the bottom right, and then shoot the beam back up and start back drawing the next frame. The question is it possible to someday have a panel that refreshes their screen all at the same time? So technically then, if you're looking at the bottom right of the screen, you're looking at just about a frame faster. And as far as I know, the way that flat panels work, that's not really something that could be done, at least at the moment. Now, the ZSWorks monitor does have a mode where it buffers one full frame and does exactly that. So in that scenario, you would always be one frame of lag, but the entire screen would write at the same time. And to be honest, I totally forgot to try that mode. Maybe I'll go back, and it's with a friend now, so maybe I'll stop over their house and try it one day. But I was actually wondering about, would that change the look of a game? Would it change the feel? So a lot of these things happen so fast that your eyes can't see it in real time, but you could sense a difference. The same way that you sense a difference between a projector, a CRT, and a flat panel TV. Even though you can't see all of these things happening, you do feel a difference when you're watching it all. So it's a good question, and it's something I'd love to look into. I really do just need to get a much better slow motion camera, and all of the best ones I've seen are like $100,000. So maybe someday I could find a beat up used one for, a lot less than that and start doing videos that describe exactly what it is that you're talking about. It's a cool theory, but it's not something I would think possible for the short-term future. Bad Reality also wanted to know about ways to use optical drive emulators or any kind of cartridge ROM cart the same way that you would something like the SIO, and I guess the Satiator, and there's a few others out there as well, where if you put your own disc in the console, it boots off of your disc. And then if you don't, it boots to whatever SD that you have, and you could launch the games that way. And there are things like that available on a bunch of disc-based consoles as well. Heck, even a modded Xbox works like that. You could either put your disc in and it boots right to that, or it boots to the dashboard. I don't see that happening on original cartridge-based consoles because I think, and I don't know for sure, but I think what you would end up having to do is take an EverDrive-like product and solder every cartridge pad to one of the pins. And then you'd also have to build in some kind of logic that auto-detects when a cartridge is plugged in. So I don't see that happening on original consoles, only because it's adding a lot of complexity to a problem that's already fixed. However, the analog products already do this. If you could set it so that if there's a cartridge plugged in when you turn it on, it boots directly to that. And if you boot it without the cartridge, you could boot to the menu and the jailbreak firmware and all that stuff. So I think for CD-based consoles, it's definitely, not only is it possible, but I hope more people start at least offering those type of kits where you could have a full ODE replacement, or you could install this thing alongside of it inside. And even if you have to open the top to get to your SD card, whatever, you could have both. I do think that's possible, and I do hope more people are going to add that functionality to their kits, but I just don't see that happening on original cartridge-based hardware, just simply because of the complexity of the install versus just plug your cartridge in. But any FPGA-based console that runs off of cartridges should be able to do that as well. So I think that's probably the solution you might be looking for if that's really the way you want it to work with your cartridges. Kieran O'Connell wanted to know if there were differences between arcade monitor CRTs and consumer grade CRTs, and then mentioned that I was talking about Brooklyn Video Games had the tube swaps done in them. To be honest, in many cases, no, there's no differences. Now, of course, there's some models that are incompatible. Every model tube might have a different line count or a different way it works. But from the perspective that I was mentioning last week, if you open up a consumer grade TV and you look at the sticker on the side of the tube and it says brand X model 123, and you open up your arcade cabinet and it says brand X model 123, then zero difference. It is the exact same tube, and now you just plug it right into your arcade machine, and now you would absolutely get full RGB. The only thing is you can't do that with every single consumer grade TV. Now, some people have basically taken a consumer TV, RGB modded it, ripped the plastic off, modded it, creatively in the inside of an arcade cabinet, and they have the RGB signal going to the OSD like they do with a console mod. Of course, you then absolutely have to step down the arcade voltage because it's like 5 volts versus 0.7 volts. But people absolutely do that. So while it wouldn't be a direct swap out, it would certainly be something that that you could possibly do as long as you knew what you were doing and just had the patience and the ability to mount it the way you wanted. Also, unrelated, I mentioned Guinness as being one of my preferred drinks. Have I ever been able to have one in Ireland? It's surprisingly different than abroad. I have not. I've unfortunately not been to Ireland, which sucks because I really wanted to go. However, I did have one out in Taiwan once, and I kind of made very naively and stupidly and ignorantly made a comment to my boss like, "Oh crap, there's Guinness at this bar. I wonder how it's going to taste coming all the way from Ireland." And he kind of laughed at me and said, "Try it and tell me what you think." And I tasted it. I was like, "Oh, this is perfect. What's up with that? It tastes fresh." And I guess the largest Guinness factory is in Thailand. So although, of course, Thailand is not Taiwan, it's a much shorter journey than it is to the States, especially the East Coast if it's going on a boat or something. So I've been told that is where most Guinness comes from, and that the one in Ireland actually is much smaller and really only handles distribution to kind of geographically close to them. So while I've had super fresh Guinness, I've never had actual Irish Guinness before, and I will get out there eventually, and I'm really interested to try it. So yeah, cool question, and thanks very much for the kind words. Enforcer had a suggestion for somebody I should interview. I do get questions like this all the time from people, and the truth is, very often I either don't know the person, I might be familiar with their work, but I don't know them well enough where I would even know where to contact them. And there's also a long list of people that I've been trying to do interviews with that our schedules just keep crossing. I've been so overwhelmed the past few months. My plan was to do everything I've been doing and an interview a week, and I haven't even been able to keep up. So I would absolutely love to do more interviews. There's so many more cool people out there. There's people I've already talked to that I want to talk to again. I either do it off the cuff when somebody messages me like, "Hey, you want to jump on my live stream?" And then I just go on theirs because it's way easier to jump on somebody else's than it is to try to make your own. But I would really like to start talking to a lot more people. I just need to find the time to do it. And I just want to make sure that I do it in a way where it's not taking away from other stuff. And that's not disrespect towards the people I'm interviewing. I just mean if I have a deadline because a product's being relaunched on, it's being launched on September 1st. I have to grind to make sure I get the launch video out to make it for that date. And that's when, I basically just go into a hole and, don't talk to anybody for 3 days to get this stuff done. So I'd love to work with I'd love to talk to a lot more people. I just got to try to find a way to schedule that and make it happen. Normal Guy wants to know if anybody's working on a Consolizer for the Atari Lynx or Bandai WonderSwan. I don't know of any for the WonderSwan, but there already is a McWill kit for the Lynx. Just search RetroRGB, and there's a bunch of info right there. And you essentially use the Lynx as a controller, and then you could plug it into a VGA monitor. And I believe there's a newer version out with different video output options. So that's definitely where I would start for the Lynx. And I'm not sure of anything about the WonderSwan, but if anybody knows of one, please let me know. Renaissance Joe had a question about the Carbi. They said they used the Carbi on a GameCube with the GC loader and Swiss. and they've noticed on their Samsung 4K TV, games like Resident Evil 4 and Eternal Darkness have some significant delays when switching from menu to in-game, as it appears to be switching resolution. This can definitely cause some deaths in the game. Is there any way I could help this? I'm already forcing 480p in Swiss, but I don't see how to stop the resolution switch from happening in-game if I can at all. So that's an interesting issue. I've actually never tested that on the GameCube, but what you're describing is a major issue for a couple of PlayStation 1 games, and I think randomly a few other games across other consoles. And that's why things like the PS1 Digital's Force 240p mode is so important, because it buffers a few lines and always keeps it in 240p so that there isn't a dropout. And using a full HDMI solution, I don't know if there's an easier way to fix this. So while I haven't tested this at all, but maybe somebody from the Swiss team is listening and might be able to chime in, because I don't even know if that'd be possible through Swiss. I'm guessing no, because there would have to be some kind of weird hacking done. But I think with multi-resolution games like that, it's just going between 480p and 480i, and I don't know if there's an instant way to turn on deinterlacing the moment the resolution changes like that. So you might be out of luck. Hopefully somebody from Swiss is listening, and awesome team of people that are constantly putting great updates into that. So if it was possible, I'm sure they would get to it eventually. But that's sorry, I got nothing for you on that one, but that's an interesting situation. Tony says they've been following along for years now and slipped down the rabbit hole of improving the video output of their consoles. They've gotten to the point where all of their old consoles use HD Retrovision component cables, routed through an Extron crosspoint, and display on a 27-inch consumer-grade TV and a BenQ projector. I think now's the time for a scaler so I could connect a modern TV or capture card. When they compare the RetroTink 2X Pro or M devices at 130 to the OSSC at 150, the tinkerer part of their brain says get the OSSC because it has more features and therefore is a better value. Another part of my brain wants something that just works and says get a RetroTink. How would I compare the two today, since prices have gotten close to each other and features have each expanded since they were first introduced, especially in the M's beta firmwares? They're leaning towards getting an OSSC for its multiple line modes and ability to set the output mode depending on the input resolution, but could easily be swayed back towards the RetroTink products. Chasing those perfect OSSC timings is not a priority. So, a few weeks ago, I probably would have had a very long answer to this, and because I did that OSSC video, I could get away with just saying the simple part of it, and that if you want to just plug in your OSSC, set your resolutions, and walk away, you could totally do that. And in fact, there's a lot of people that always bring up that they don't like the way things look with optimal timings. They don't like the aspect ratio. They, whatever reasons they have. It's all preference, so that's totally cool. My only answer to this would be, do you have any composite or S-video consoles that you really want to work with? If the answer is yes, and it's a composite video console, maybe pick up like the 2X Pro or something. If it's an S-video console, the Core U and an OSSC would probably be a better choice, because you can get to 1080p from 240p. But generally speaking, because it seems like you already have a bunch of complicated equipment, just going to the OSSC is probably the best bet for you. I'm obviously a giant fan of the RetroTink products, but this is one of those situations where I don't think you could pick a wrong device. But I think the OSSC might be one that's a little bit more suited for, like, okay, I already have a million other things. Now I want to get 1080p out from the OSSC. And obviously it accepts component video without any problems as well. So I would just let the inputs decide for you. Is there any chance of using composite or S-video? Or do you really want 1080p versus 480p? I think those would be the two deciding factors. So my guess for you is OSSC, but think about it and see if there's anything else you might be able to apply to your scenario. Jason Guffey said they took my advice a few weeks back and found a 24-outlet power strip along with a ton of other goodies from a garage sale. It says 125 volts and 15 amp AC, but lacks any real surge protection. Do you think this thing is safe to use for consoles? Once again, total newbie. So I am also kind of a newbie when it comes to power. I don't like giving power advice because I know enough about it to be scared, I guess. But I think it comes down to what I talked about before, in that how many things are turned on at the same time. So if you're only going to have one TV, one stereo, one console turned on at the same time, and maybe a few other things like a switch and a splitter and going out to something else. So basically not 5 monitors and 10 consoles all through some kind of matrix switch. If you're worried about surge protection, you can get one of those APC boxes I have linked in my Amazon page, plug that into the wall, and then plug the 24 outlet strip into that. Because once again, don't visualize it as 24 things going into one surge protector. You have to visualize it as how many things are being used at a time. And from the opposite, if lightning strikes, it's going to blow out that protector. Doesn't really matter if there's 1 or a million things plugged into it. So you get the protection side, you get the power conditioning side, and they're reasonably priced. And they come recommended from people that are smarter than me. So I think that's probably how I would start out with this, and then see how that works for you. Or if you know that you're going to have a lot of things turn on at the same time, start researching power conditioners and surge protectors, but it can get really pricey, and it's kind of interesting to see where the price actually makes a difference. So going from, sine wave to, to the, forgot what the other name for it was, it's another bigger difference in price, but I would just start out with that one thing and kind of go from there. And the other thing you could do is, if you have it all going into one surge protector, you could just unplug that from the wall when you're not using it. That's absolutely what I do for my expensive BVMs, because I can't afford to replace them. So they are not plugged in unless they're in use. Also, another question, they finally got their Otaku SCART switch in after 7 months of international shipping. They do like it quite a bit, but I guess they ordered the version that doesn't come with a casing of any sort. Theirs didn't even come packed with foam like the one that mine came with. So how much risk is there regarding shorting this thing out with static? Ooh, good question. They found a couple of 3D printers around Etsy to maybe make a 3D printed case for it, but none have got back to me. Should be check Thingiverse. Should actually have that case on there. So I wouldn't worry so much about static. I would worry more about it shorting, but that is a very valid issue. So I think I would just try to get some kind of case for it. Worst comes to worst, you could try to make a plexi case. For now, piece of cardboard, actually a couple of pieces of cardboard, so none of the through-hole components poke through it onto something else. I would start with that, which is a silly solution, but imagine stacking a couple of pieces of cardboard, cut holes in it where the mount holes are, tie some twist ties on there to keep it together. It's a ridiculous, even talking about it makes me kind of giggle, but it's at least one step over nothing. So you don't have to worry about shorting it out on the bottom, or if you need to pick it up, on the bottom, you're not shorting it that way. But yeah, I would just look into some kind of case just for those exact reasons. Shorting things out first, static is always good practice for that too. And Jason wanted to make the point that they didn't make a comment about shipping, blaming the Otaku company. They were just bitching about international shipping these days, which I think we all understood you, but thank you for the clarification. I think we've all had packages lost for months in these past 6 months. Curtis Seegers said they know many people aren't big fans of the M Classic, which is fine. And as I always say, there's a lot of solutions out there and everyone should pick what works best for them. They like how the M Classic makes Xbox 360 games and other games from that generation look on their 4K TV with the scaling on. Their issue with it is that the pass-through mode doesn't seem to be pass-through. It causes problems with several other outputs, including the FrameMeister and even the Xbox 360 in pass-through. Usually this involves the screen flickering or brief loss of signal. It always works fine with the scaling turned on. These issues only occur when in pass-through mode with all scaling off. They sent back their first one and got a second one, hoping it was just a faulty unit, but the second one had the same issue. They've asked in other forums and looked for people having a similar issue and haven't found it. Any idea what's causing this or what they could do to resolve it? I'd really like to put this at the end of my chain and just turn it on to pass through unless I need it. And as it is, they have to keep switching it around to the actual device they want to use, which is a hassle. So that's really weird. I've tested the original, and tested the original M cable, and I have the M Classic, and I have never had an issue in pass-through mode, including in situations where the M Classic itself didn't work when turned on, connected through certain devices, but as soon as you put it into pass-through mode, it's fine. So maybe just kind of swap things out and to try to reduce the amount of things in between, try connecting directly. Try just removing components one at a time. Definitely start with a cable because it's the cheapest, and because if it turns out that you bought a new cable for nothing, everybody could use a spare HDMI cable, and they're pretty inexpensive as well. I'm pretty sure I have the ones that I've tried, tested, and really beat up, and they've worked fine. Linked to that Amazon link as well. They're the white ones with the red stripes. They look like candy cane. But I would definitely try that. Another thing that you might want to do is because I actually have one right here because I'm doing some testing with these. Since these goes into your console, try if you have a switch or something, try plugging it into that. And if not, try using an adapter that's a receptacle adapter, so that you could basically sit this between the very last like right in your TV's input. So imagine, you have going in here just like a 1-foot cable into your TV, and then you could power it right off your TV. Also, if you are powering it off your TV, try a different power adapter just in case. And then have the adapter so that the side that normally plugs in is changed to a receptacle. So that way you could have whatever cable was being plugged into your TV's input now goes into this, and now this plugs into that. So essentially you're changing the sides of this. And that way you could just flip the switch as you need it. That would be the first thing I would try, as well as trying to connect things direct. And once again, HDMI cables. But it should be pretty cheap, because one of those cable adapters, I guess 2 cable adapters and 1 HDMI cable should be like less than $20. So, if you're already invested in this, you might as well pick them up. And they're tools that you could use for other stuff. But I've never had a problem in pass-through mode. As far as your observation of how it makes old Xbox 360 games look, I have very, very strong feelings about this. Just an opinion. I think the M Classic and M cable is absolutely useless for anything pre-720p, but the original Xbox 720p games look amazing. I have a video coming out in a few days that will show details of this, and in fact, even in the video, I say that I really want to go back and test 360 and PS3 games, and I guess maybe even Wii U to a point, but basically anything that runs 720p natively, I think there's a potential that this could make a huge difference. Now, 1080p and up, I've tried it with the Switch, I've tried it with other stuff. I guess it's a matter of preference, but I didn't really see anything. But to be honest, it made such a difference for the original Xbox's 720p games that if those are your favorite games, I think it's worth the $100, which is a bold statement because, this thing has gotten such a bad name because of Marseille, because their marketing says that, use this with a Super Nintendo. How are you going to use this with a Super Nintendo? Tell me in your marketing how you're going to do that. And also because, they did have a bunch of shillers promoting them and saying this is the greatest thing that's ever been invented, which whatever. So yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting device. And when used properly in the right scenario could make a big difference. I just think they got such a bad rap because of their marketing and because of the people they chose to shove it down people's throats and say you should use it with everything all the time. In fact, everybody I know that owns one of these things agrees with you about that. And I guess me too, about where exactly is the best place to use them. So one of these days, if I get around to it and I have free time, which I never do, but maybe if they come up with another product or something, I'll get one and really show where it absolutely shines the best and where it might actually be worth using, as opposed to just kind of throwing it on old consoles and trying to look for the little bit of difference that it produces. Whereas on the 720p games, there's no trying to look. It looked magnificent. So I guess more on that in the video that's coming up, and I'm sure I'll talk a little bit more about it in the weekly roundup afterwards as well. Drew said that when they heard me mention Renee was working with those new shmup releases, that they were wondering about games like Xenocrisis and Tanglewood. They remembered that Renee had involvement with Xenocrisis, but couldn't remember if he did for Tanglewood. The reason they brought it up is because they bought the Tanglewood re-release from MegaCat Studios and opened it up out of curiosity. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be looking for in regards to proper voltage conversion, but this board is just a chip and a solder jumper. Have I heard anything about it, and should I be worried? So I don't actually own Tanglewood, otherwise I would have popped open the copy. I wish I had the room to buy it. I did purchase the game the day it came out, but I got it so that I could get the ROM along with the Steam version. I think the best thing to do would be to talk to Matt, the creator of Tanglewood. I did ask Renee, he happened to be around, and he said he wasn't sure if, or he actually just had no info on the MegaCat re-release. He didn't even know it was a thing, which, once Renee was hired to make it, he wouldn't have been in the loop anyway at that point, so that doesn't really mean anything. I would just take a picture of the PCB and tweet at Matt from Tanglewood. Matt's pretty awesome, and he's also pretty available, so I would just do that and see if it's the same board that Matt had wanted, because Matt spent quite a bit of time in our interview talking about how proud he was at how well that board was built, about how it really did feel like an original Genesis game. It was the same weight, it was the same build. So I think if there was a switcheroo done, which once again I have no clue, I think Matt would certainly want to know. So I guess I would just politely ask up on Twitter, or I guess wherever else he's on social media, Facebook, all the rest of them. So yeah, that's an interesting one though. Maybe tag me in the post or something too, because I'd be interested to know the answer as well, because I believe I did a post on that, or if I didn't do a post on it, I certainly told a few friends about it, and they had ordered the MegaCat Studios version. So definitely interested to know the answer. Well, that's it for this time. If you're new to any of these Q&As and you're just joining us, please remember to just ask any question you would like wherever it is that you support in the latest support post. The way the services work, I can't go skimming through older posts, so every week I just pull up the post from the previous week, answer all of those questions, and go from there. Also, if I've missed your question, it is not intentional. Very often, I will accidentally delete a file in post, or I guess sometimes I just scroll right past it and don't even see it, but it's never intentional. I think another more likely scenario is days like today, where I'm recording this Thursday night, but this is going to go out probably Friday afternoon, so if your question came in between that period of time, I would have missed it. So my apologies if I ever do. Please just re-ask it. And of course, just thanks so much to everybody that participates and everybody that supports, because without your support, none of this stuff would happen. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next week.